County Schools, typically in support of our after school or our summer camp programs. Doesn't bind us to anything. It's just it's one option that's available to us. We have used them fairly extensively in the past, though. So, with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff on agenda item 5.1? Consent. 5.2.
Approve an agreement between Beasley Media Group, Inc. and the city to host the 2019 Wild Splash event at Coachman Park on March 2nd, 2019. Approve a reimbursement payment to Beasley Media Group, Inc. from ticket sales made during the event and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Dunbar again.
Again, a typical annual item that we bring forward. City takes in basically all the revenue from the event through our ticketing agency. So this allows us to settle up with Beasley after for their share of what they're entitled to. So I think last year it was probably a little under $50,000 is what the payout was, but it could vary from year to year, so we make sure we get this into you in advance. So with that, happy to answer questions.
5.2. Consent. Mr. Albrecht.
Yeah, I kind of read the contract on that. Your city takes in all the revenue and then cuts them a check less the $25,000 and whatever. And
all the expenses that the city's entitled to, yeah. We use our ticketing account, e-tickets. So all tickets are procured through that. So then the city receives, obviously, all the revenue. So after all the expenses are paid and after the city's made whole, whatever is left then goes to Beasley.
Okay, I see.
Mr. Condon.
These events usually have averaged 12,500 to 13,500 people.
It typically sells out every year, yes.
And has it usually broken even, or
from the city standpoint?
From the city standpoint,
the city has typically always made a profit on these events.
Thank you,
Mr. Poblaze.
Thank you. As I recall, Wild Splash is it's a great attendance, but it pretty much trashes a lot of the arterial streets coming into Coachman Park. So the expenses you referred to, does that include the overtime hours by city personnel to clean up the town?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Consent?
yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
6.1.
Approve an agreement between the Police Department and Exxon Incorporated for digital evidence storage and management and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Major Dalton.
Major Dalton Police Department. The police department's had a historical challenge with regard to the storage of physical evidence, which could be stored digitally. We're talking about documents, anything that could be scanned digitally, videos, things of that nature. And that creates inherent difficulties with the items being stored in different locations within the police department for records retention, things of that nature. So with that in mind and trying to streamline that process, we issued RFP 2918 in cooperation with the city's finance department for a digital evidence management system. The aim of that system was to determine or to locate a CGIS compliant platform which would allow us the ability to share information, to look at records retention issues so we could address those more appropriately, ability to connect with both Apple and Windows computers that had audit functionality, as well as a public platform for us to receive information from the public should there be a case that would garner attention. Based upon the RFP proposals and presentations, Axon was selected as the preferred vendor. This agreement will essentially allow for the foundation of a interview room camera program, in-car cameras, and body-worn cameras. However, none of the equipment is being awarded at this time. The department anticipated this purchase and has funding available for the first year of the agreement in the amount of $67,600 through P1802 police equipment replacement. And in subsequent years, we'd look to fund this agreement, operating costs through operating budget, and also seeking additional authorization for the chief to sign the quote appendix, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions on 6.1? Mr. Condon.
So, as I understand, you have enough money in the budget for the first year's
Correct. We would seek to put subsequent years into our annual operating budget.
And so where would the $338,000 come from, or minus the $67,000?
And it's yearly $67,600, so we look to build that into our operating budget in subsequent years. This year, we already have money in place for it.
It's a general fund expense.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, council? Major, I hope I'm speaking for the council, but please pass on to the chief and the men and women of our Clearwater Police Department that we're very proud of y'all, that y'all aren't going out there trying to sensationalize or mislead the public. You're out there serving and protecting the public and each one of us. So thank you from all of us.
Thank you.
Consent on agenda item 6.1?
Yes.
Please.
7.1.
Award a construction contract to Preferred Materials, Inc. of Tampa, Florida, in the annual amount of $2,300,000 for 2019 citywide roadway resurfacing project based on unit prices with an option for three one-year renewals, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Johnson.
Roger Johnson, Engineering Department. The Engineering Department is responsible for planning and implementing our street resurfacing project. Annually, we do about 10 to 12 miles. This contract will allow us to kick off with a new vendor, a new contractor, get things started for the 2019 plan. It also gives the option, as Mr. Horn said, for 3 one-year annual renewals. Any questions?
Any questions on 7.1?
My typical, this is a not to exceed number, correct?
It's a unit-based price, unit price-based contract. So we're not entitled to pay all 2.2 million.
Right.
It's based off of the unit prices, yes.
Consent?
Yes.
7.2.
Award a construction contract to Precision Sidewalk Safety Corporation of Ocala, Florida, in the amount of $150,000 for repair of sidewalks in accordance with City Code of Ordinances, Section 2.5641D, other government entities bids, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Johnson again.
Substituting.
I have elbow here. Anyway.
Substituting.
Oh.
This contract here is to Precision Sidewalks. This is tag teaming with our Parks and Rec Department, trying to get rid of as many trip hazards as we can on our sidewalk program. What Precision does is they have a specialized service. Instead of grinding down or removing the panels and replacing them, they have special services that horizontally cut them. So they have a specialty service, and that's what this contract's for. Questions?
Questions? Anybody? Consent?
Yes.
Thank you.
7.3.
Approve a work order for GAI Consultants, Inc. for design of Cleveland Streetscape Phase 3 reconstruction in the amount of $427,555, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Schoberg.
Good morning. I'm Elliot Schoberg, the Stormwater Utility Manager for the City of Clearwater. This project began as a streetscaping project with the intent of replacing the existing storms, sewer, water, and reclaimed utilities, but not reconstruction of the roadway. During the development of the streetscape portion of the project, there was additional utility and grading issues that were identified. The narrowing of the street and streetscaping features would result in geometry changes to the roadway that would cause drainage and drivability issues. The streetscaping plans are nearly complete, but the underground portion and elevations need to be designed to resolve the drainage and drivability issues. The completed project will result in a new roadway and utilities that will provide many years of service to our residents. And with that, I'm ready to answer some questions.
Any questions on 7.3? Consent?
Yes.
Yes.
7.4.
Approve a work order to Engineer of Record Brown and Caldwell in the amount of $142,535 to provide design and bidding services for Marshall Street water reclamation process control gate repairs, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Brown.
Good morning. My name is Jeremy Brown, the Engineering Manager for Utilities. This project will repair and or replace some of the control gates at the Marshall Street Water Reclamation Facility. The control gates basically allow plant operators to balance the flow rates into the various aeration tanks, and it also allows them to isolate the tanks for maintenance. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions on 7.4? Consent?
Thank you.
8.1.
Approve the agreement between Phillies Florida LLC and the City of Clearwater Fire and Rescue Department to provide emergency medical services at Spectrum Field for 2019 baseball events as outlined in the agreement and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Chief Ellers.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. This request is for your approval to approve the agreement between the Phillies, Florida and the City of Clearwater Fire Rescue. This is our annual agreement between the two to provide EMS coverage at Spectrum Field for not only the Phillies training, but also the Thrasher games and other special events that occur there. This agreement does reflect the increase of the current contract rates.
Any questions for staff on 8.1? Chief, help me out. I know a few years ago the Phillies used an outside, a third party.
That is correct. That is correct.
So, we appreciate their, working with us on this. It just shows another example of how the Phillies support the community in ways that a lot of us don't even realize.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Consent?
Yes.
9.1.
Approve a development agreement between Decade Properties, Inc., property owner, and the City of Clearwater, providing for the allocation of 27 units from the Hotel Density Reserve pursuant to Beach by Design, adopt Resolution 19-03, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Perry.
Mark Perry, Planning and Development. There's been no changes since the last work session and last council meeting with regard to the conceptual site plans or the conceptual elevations. Additional sheets were added highlighting the location of interior corridors and how that would work. So that is an addition, but it doesn't change the concept plans or the elevations. There were a few changes to the development agreement that I'd like to highlight. Based on last month's council meeting, we've added a limitation of bar service, section 6.1.11 of the development agreement. Alcoholic beverage sales are basically limited to incidental sale of beer and wine only, out of coolers and things like that. 6.1.12 specifies that parking spaces are only available for guests of the hotel and for users of the marina component. 6.1.13 lists things like that. We made a change to our existing language. Typically, development agreements are in effect for 10 years. We've upped that to 20 years. And we've taken the typical language in our development agreements for hotel density allocation with regard to limitation of amplified music, and it basically says there'll be no outdoor amplified music at the project at any time. Prior agreements would have time limitations. So that's in addition to the other changes that we had made previously that dealt with limitation of the marina facility and how that's allowed to operate. If there are any questions.
Any questions for staff on 9.1? Mr. Albright.
Yeah, do you know if the two sides have gotten together yet and actually talked about some kind of negotiated settlement?
I'm not sure. I haven't been informed of anything. I don't know.
If I may, Pam Aiken, I spoke to Mr. Ongst Friday, I believe, Friday afternoon, and he has made the offer to meet with them through their attorney twice, one in, I think, January 18th or 19th, and then late last week. He has not, as of Friday afternoon, he had not heard back from the attorney. So to my knowledge, they have not met, although they did offer to provide a location and offer to meet with them. So no.
I'm disappointed in this because we had quite a turnout at the last meeting of people that were concerned about this, yet they're not reaching out to the developers reaching out to them, and their attorneys giving them advice that, no, don't talk to the developer, we're going to do it our way. Well, this is something we have, it should be last week I talked to a couple of people that came in that said, let's try to make this work. Well, there's only so much we can do as council, but if they're not willing to listen or to come to the table on this, it's disappointing to me. I'd like to make suggestion, I don't know how I go forward with this, that we get them together before we come up with a decision, whether it goes beyond the advice of their attorney, but I would like to see as a council member that the developer and the people that are objecting to this get together and listen to the developer. I think the developer's trying to be a good neighbor with what he's got, and I think that needs to happen. Or it's going to be, you know, the outcome I think will be better that way.
We can't do that today. We would have to do that on Thursday. But it's something that I would hope that has been heard. Okay. Any other questions? Because I think Mr. Onk sent us all, at least I got a letter late Friday. Did y'all not get a, saying what Ms. Aiken had told us? So, and again, you know, to reemphasize, they had reached out. Now, Ms. Aiken, you were going to say something?
Regardless of what happens at that point, it is a noticed public hearing. So the public hearing will go forward. Right. And if you continue that for further meetings, you have the ability to do that. However, the public hearing, it won't stop the public hearing. You're going to have to do that anyway.
Right. Any other questions, Council? Ms. Aiken, a gentleman met with me, and I think with the rest of Council, you know, maybe suggesting that we not grant the full 27 units that were being requested. And I told him, and I don't know what my colleague said, but, you know, you need to reach out to the developer and see if that's something that he would be interested in. But I guess my question is, we don't have to grant the 27 units, right? We could grant a lesser amount if we wanted to?
Yes, sir. You don't have to grant any units. So this is a legislative act that you have control over. This agreement is within your control. You can grant fewer units. I don't know whether or not that will meet their need, but that's why you have a public hearing.
And then the other argument that we kept hearing, and I think all of us have heard, is that the units that we're granting, we don't have the authority to grant. That because this project is south of the Opal Sands, that, you know, we're wasting everybody's time. Could you clarify that again, please?
Well, we've heard that argument, and we have looked at that argument from a planning and legal perspective and disagree with it. They're taking the position that there's only two extremely limited areas. And those areas applied to the resort density pool. Thank you. I get the names confused sometimes. And it's very specific in the plan. This is a different pool. The resort density pool has been maxed out and used. We will never, one suggestion was because we hadn't sort of removed it from the plan, that somehow implied that it covered both the pool and the reserve. Thank you. But we will never remove it from the plan because these units are on the ground existing and we need to have it in the plan to support those existing units. So it doesn't mean that it applies to the reserve when the plan refers to the pool.
And the reserve was set up for limited service type hotels, not resort hotels.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and this is considered a limited service hotel because it has no restaurant, it has no real meeting
No convention space, no meeting space, yeah.
Okay.
Exactly right.
Mr. Hamilton.
And the property, and I'm not talking about the decade prior now, but the property that is on Clearwater Pass, just to the technically west, but everybody calls it north of the Sankey Bridge, where the old Hilton Hotel was. I'm talking about back when you had the frog pond at the Hilton. I'm going way back. Then it was a Holiday Inn Sunspree. When that property also has rooms, units designated for it. Did those come out of the resort pool or are they out of the reserve, hotel density reserve?
I believe they're out of the reserve.
Okay. So they're mid-level, not resort units.
Correct.
Okay.
That's the one that you're talking about doing condos, though.
There's two. One was, as I recall, back when I was in council in 16, one was going to be condo, one was going to be, it's going to be two buildings.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was going to be a mixed development.
Mr. Horn.
Mayor, Council, I can't resist asking this question. You know, typically, we have some leverage over some of the actions of the developer, you know, in these kinds of matters. But when it's just the opposite, and it has to do with community, people, then how do we exercise leverage over them? I mean, I'm speaking specifically to your concern and your disappointment, but at the end of the day, if they don't do it, then what does the council do? I mean,
I guess you'll find out Thursday night.
the Thursday night.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, you know. Mr. Condo.
In response to the manager, one thing we could do is not give them the rooms this Thursday, which would allow them, or wouldn't force them to talk to each other, but would allow them to start over again in negotiation with the residents, or the residents with the.
But you're penalizing the developer who has been leaning forward, asking.
We don't have to give them rooms at all. I mean, there's nothing that says they're requesting it, and they have to go back to the
But what happens if the other side then never meets
Yeah,
with the developer?
Well, it's a big what if, and we don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, bottom line, the developer in this, the owner of the property has the right to operate the property and/or develop the property based on what the zoning and what our rules and allowances dictate. And to be honest with you, you know, this property has followed all of those rules. He's totally within he's not asking for anything that no one else with that property designation and everything else is allowed to do, and has basically done everything asked. You know, every issue that's been brought forward, he's addressed that and made the concession necessary to say that won't happen, this won't happen, and everything else. Don't know what else the developer himself can do to appease the community, especially when the community is not willing to meet and talk. So we'll see what we do Thursday night, but, you know, there's, you know, it almost reminds me of what's going on in Washington right now. You know, we're not going to give you $1 for the wall, and I don't care what your position is. Well, that's kind of where we are. You know, if there's no bend, you know, if you've got the flexibility of an I-beam, then we do what we have to do. So we'll see.
Okay, so we'll have this on our agenda for Thursday night
Thank you.
at 6 o'clock or shortly thereafter. 9.2.
Provide direction regarding a letter of support to the Florida Department of Transportation. Mr. Hartman.
Good morning, Rick Hartman, Planning and Development. This letter of support is an opportunity for the City of Clearwater to show that it's fully engaged with regional transportation issues. As we all know from traveling to and from Tampa, the West Shore Interchange is a significant obstacle to quick and easy travel. Right now, though, the funding in the project for the interchange is not scheduled to start until 2029, and we want to be part of one regional voice, I believe. And that's what the letter is, showing that we think this is an extremely important project, that it needs to be moved up the priority list. And by speaking with one voice with both sides, even Pasco County and such, throughout the Tampa Bay region, then that shows the federal government and the state government how important this interchange and regional projects are to the City of Clearwater and to the region. So we ask for the mayor to sign this letter of support on behalf of the city of Clearwater.
So are we comfortable with this, council?
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
I even like the letter.
Thank you very much.
Agenda item 10.1.
Approve renewal of license and maintenance services agreement with Environmental Systems Research Institute, ESRI, of Redwood, California, for an amount not to exceed $272,340 for mapping and land management software licensing and maintenance, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Mayor.
Dan Mayer, IT. We've used ESRI for approximately 20 years. It does all our mapping and imaging for in support of most of our utilities, urban forestry, as well as our parcel-based land management.
Any questions on 10.1?
This is an annual contract?
This one we're bringing forward is for 3 years. We renew annually, but we're bringing 3 years forward at once.
Okay. I was going to say, that's an awful lot of money for 1 year.
Yeah, the annual is just about $85,000.
All right. Thank you.
Consent?
Yes.
10.2.
Approve a contract for maintenance and services agreement to Convergent Technologies Limited of Schaumburg, Illinois, for an amount not to exceed $506,392.22 for services and maintenance of hardware and software for building security control systems, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute them. Mr. Mayor, again.
Mayor and Council, Convergent is our door access and security system. This is a 5-year agreement, hence the larger number. It also includes installation of access control at several additional buildings moving forward, including an emergency approval for access control at the new City Hall in the Bank of America building, which we just completed.
The City Hall is not in the Bank of America.
The city office is in the Bank of America building, I'm sorry.
Questions on 10.2? Mr. Aldrin.
Yeah, under the pricing options, is the maintenance, preventative maintenance not included on that? Is there a reason why that's, or do you think that's on a?
Well, we have a 1-year equipment and workmanship, and there's not a lot of wear and tear once installed, so the preventative maintenance isn't as critical. You know, we can, all the doors automatically release. We have a problem, we turn it off and the door is open. And then we just get a call out as quick as possible. We try to ride them as long as they'll function.
Okay, understand.
Consent?
Yes.
11.1 through 11.16 are either second or third readings. Any questions, council? 12.1.
Mayor, Council, you all received a email, and I've sent you some emails, and so you're well aware of this. Clearwater Ferry, Tricia Rodriguez sent you all an email dated the 31st of December indicating her interest in participating in the spring break campaign. That email sort of confused me, and I ultimately asked her to have a meeting, and we did have a meeting with staff. And at that meeting, what emerged were a couple of things. One is that in the email, she references a request on the part of the council to ask them to report, ask Clearwater Ferry to provide a report on if the Clearwater Ferry was impacted, that their ridership was impacted at all by the previous campaigns. And then the second aspect was she submitted a proposal for the city to subsidize a discount in tickets. It was a $2 discount at the time. At the end of the meeting, she had indicated that it was a $1. She kind of backed away from the $2 discount to the $1 discount, and then wanted the council to speak to its commitment toward water transportation. My focus was not so much on that conversation as it was on her request. And I've talked to you all about that individually. So what I'm asking you today is, do you want us to sit down, the staff? Ed Chesney will probably represent us, and negotiate an agreement for her participation during the spring break campaign. We have always involved them in the marketing aspect of it. They have not participated in the last couple of years in a more fundamental way as compared to how they would participate this year if you all, support their requests. So that's really what it boils down to. That's what I'm asking. Do you want me to sit down with, or staff to sit down with her and negotiate an agreement?
Mr. Horn, let's ask the manager some questions first, on that. Do you have any questions? Mr. Hamilton?
If we were to agree to this, I'm assuming we would fund it out of parking revenues, correct? Just like we are the PSTA, taking it out of parking.
We could.
Parking revenues?
We could. We could.
I mean, I would think that would be the reasonable, the logical place to take it from if we were to do it, rather than out of reserve or something like that.
Right.
Take it out of parking revenues. But I'm confused, well, not confused, but I'm trying to figure out exactly what Clearwater Ferry's question is about water transportation and our commitment to it, because, I mean, I'm one of those, and do we have a better idea of what she's looking for out of that?
No, I do not.
Okay.
I'm almost wondering, let me try to answer, and I don't know, but I'm wondering, you see Pinellas County, Hillsborough, Tampa, and St. Petersburg had contributed, I think this last year, $150,000 to that ferry. But that amount had gone down. Initially, it was $300,000, $400,000 each. So they reduced it. Plus, they get revenue in return, come back to them after they meet a certain threshold. So, I don't know whether she's going down that path where she wants an annual subsidy, from us to keep their business going. And I guess my question is, what is this $32,000 roughly, what is she going to do with it? Is it just going to help reduce her costs? If she gets more, if Clearwater Ferry gets more ridership, does some of that money come back to us? I mean, we're already subsidizing it in effect when we provide for free parking, right? Because we provide free parking for the people who use the ferry now at our lots, all week long. Yeah, not just on the weekend. So, I like with Mr. Hamilton, I'm trying to answer the question, but I also don't know the answer as to what she's looking for, what Clearwater Ferry is looking for. But I have a problem giving them the money because we didn't do an RFP. There may be somebody else, and here it's a for-profit business that, we're going to subsidize, and they've done a great job, but is that going to stay here in Clearwater? Are they going to use our contribution to expand their services to other communities?
As far as I know, it's really focused on the campaign itself, getting people from here to the beach. I can't speak to anything beyond that.
Are they adding more vessels?
They will. She did indicate that they would add more boats to address whatever the capacity demand would exist at the time.
Mr. Puzzle.
Thank you, Mayor. And that's where I'm coming from. It's about, the whole reason we entered into agreement with PSTA to subsidize trolleys was to make it convenient and enhance the tourist experience by giving them free trips to and from the beach. So considering that strategy, I'm willing to be able to do that similar thing, enhance the tourist experience by offering an alternative mode of transportation, but it has to be about capacity. They have to be able to add more capacity. So to subsidize it for the same 3 boats, and I'm going to use the Outback Bowl as an example, we left lines of people on the dock because they didn't have the capacity. So if we're going to enhance tourist experience, it has to be to increase capacity. So, spring break we need maximum capacity, and 3 boats is not going to do it. The trolleys put in an additional 6 routes on the road. So I'm of the position where I would like to be able to bring them in, even though they missed the deadline due to confusion or missed whatever that reason was. but I'd like to at least have that discussion with them, and if they can increase capacity to give people the option of not waiting on the bridge, then yes. Figure out what that looks like with more boats, and what the actual dollar cost is. But to just subsidize their routes for a $1 a ticket, I mean, it's about capacity for me.
Ms. Egan, did you want to add something to what, or clarify?
After the councilman, I just have a comment.
Yeah, I was, I'm all for helping out with the spring break traffic, getting people to the beach. And, you know, I told Trish, I mean, you take a trolley, you're going to be stuck in the same traffic as all the rest of the cars. You take a ferry, you're going to get over there in 15 minutes. You're not waiting in the big line. So she has an advantage when you really think about it off the bat, that first of all, you're taking a boat ride, which is a lot more fun going to the beach and coming back. So, but I don't want to leave her out as far as, I've been real proud that she stepped up and actually got this going. So the dollar seems to fit more with me than the $2 on that. But I think we just ought to open it up for negotiation and talk again to her about really what she wants.
Mr. Kondo.
I would agree with the last two speakers. One of our goals is to try to use all means of transportation. And from Tricia's point of view, she wants to know from us that we're committed to water transportation. And and especially during spring break, she wants to be part of the solution. And if this amount satisfies her, it does help alleviate some of the traffic on the bridge. But I agree, in negotiations, we have to be assured that we have the boats.
Just go follow.
Let me see what Ms. Aiken wanted to add.
I was just wanting to make sure we understand the direction. It sounds like it would, when you all finish, it sounds like it's performance-based and not a lump sum, but a amount based on performance and results, not just whatever that number is.
Because the one thing that struck me, Council, was that Clearwater Ferry said that they had 40,000 riders last year. Did y'all catch that, or am I? Do y'all recall the number?
I remember seeing 40,000, but I can't remember if that was the total number, or if that was during a certain period. I'm not sure. I can't remember.
Yeah, but the St. Pete to Tampa ferry only had 40,000. So I was confused by her 40,000.
During the campaign period in 2018, the data she's provided says 25,094. This was in the chart that she provided. 2017, it was 29,181. Now I think, yeah, that's what and then 2016, it was 34,184, and then there's a caveated number for another time frame, but that's what she's indicated.
We have a better destination.
Yeah. Well, but that was, I didn't know whether that was year-round or just for a 6-week period, you know?
Yeah.
It was March, the 2018 data was March through April, and the 2017 data was March through April, and the 2016 data was March through April.
Yeah. Mr. Hamilton.
Well, and I'm amenable, to the negotiation of, the $1, but there's a part of me, we've got to be very careful, because if we're going to start agreeing to help fund for-profit businesses, where do you draw the line on that? Where do we say, no? We have to be very careful there. But as far as the question of water transportation, our support of it, I think there's no question we support that. The problem is, we're never going to be a Fort Lauderdale and have the water taxi service like Fort Lauderdale, because we don't allow for commercial development of our waterfront on this side, on the mainland side. We can't do it. And then on the beach side, the development is pretty much done on the water, and it doesn't have a lot of what Fort Lauderdale is, where you get off the water taxi and 3 steps and you're in this restaurant, or you get off the water taxi here, you leave this restaurant, you get on the water taxi, you take it across the waterway, you get off there and you're in another establishment. We're not going to have that type of system, but I don't think our support of water transportation is questionable in any form. But we do have to keep in mind, how much support can we give a for-profit business? Because who's going to be the next one through the door saying, hey, I'm a for-profit business, but I could use a little help too. So we've got to be very, very cognizant of that. So.
Just a follow-up. And great comments, Hoyt. I think that, again, it goes back to enhancing the tourist experience.
And I don't disagree with you.
My question logistically was, and I wouldn't want to do this on anything, but for the spring break where we obviously have a gridlock problem, this is a great option for tourists. So, and I'm about adding capacity, so if she gets more boats, do we have the docking facilities? I know where they currently are down by Coachman Park, but for instance, the Beach Rec Center, because as I understand, their boats can go under that second bridge. If she adds, say, 3 more boats, so she can maximize capacity to justify this expenditure for the city, do we have that ability? Because aren't those docks within under 10 years, 15 years old over by the Beach Rec Center? So they could have a separate landing place over there? Because, I mean, she's going to have a hard time if she brings on a total of 5 boats or whatever, using that one dock down by Coachman Park.
Mayor, if I
Ms.
can
Silverberg.
respond to that. So actually, that has been a stop on the routes. I don't know the current status. It depends on the boat, is my understanding. My recollection is that, some the profile of some boats has allowed them to serve that stop at the Beach Rec Center. I don't know the current configuration, but it depends on apparently the vessel.
So we do have more landing space.
We do, and we've used the one at the Beach Rec Center in the past.
But let's clarify our expectations too. I don't know that she's going to be able to bring in 5 boats for March.
Maybe one boat.
Maybe one.
One at a time.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
Well, I understand there's availability of 3 more boats locally, so I don't know what you may or may not be willing to do.
Well, but I think to the previous conversation around performance-based, I think an agreement would have to clearly identify what that performance is expected to be, and then you all can weigh whether you think that's sufficient.
And, I think all of us have said it in one way or another. The experience of riding the boat is something that you would want to do even as a day tripper. It doesn't necessarily, Ms. Aiken, help us out though now, back to Mr. Hamilton's point of a precedent that we're setting here, and what do we have to look out for so that, next, if we do it this year, is it going to come back to us next year, and do we have to do something different?
I think what you're proposing is to essentially purchase a service and enhance a service. And I think that that's the way we couch it, and that's what you contract for. Performance levels, a service that you are purchasing from them. I don't think that creates precedent for other types of things to come, or people to come back for you. And you, of course, never have to do that service again if you don't want to. It would be up to you to decide what you wanted to do next year.
Okay.
And if this was a service you were going to contemplate continually providing, you may want to do an RFP.
We okay?
Yep.
I think we're good.
I think so. Pam?
That's it.
Okay.
All right. Any other concerns, council? If not, our meeting starts Thursday, February the 7th at 6 o'clock. We are adjourned.
Good work, George.